Hey everyone, first video, Star Trek CCG Premier Edition. Now, if you remember looking at the booster packs we had 3 separate booster packs for Premier. Apparently there were 6 printed versions of this set. Can our experts here explain what's going on with 6 different printings of Premier?
So Decipher did a lot of different printings of this first set. They were just trying to get it off the ground. They printed a black border limited edition, which says limited edition on the packs. And they also gave out a gift set. There were 250 of those made officially and given out to executives and contributors and investors in the game. Those are identical card-wise unless you find it in the gift set box. Then they printed in 1994, they reprinted the whole set in white border with the unlimited on the pack. It says unlimited edition. And those were the same exact cards with a white border so that they could be distinguished for collector's purposes, a lot like Magic's Alpha and the way they continued to reprint some of the early sets. Then in 1995, they printed a set of the same cards with 17 corrections. Most of them were spelling. They misspelled Luoxana Troy's name on 2 different cards, but a few of them had game impacts, like adding Mind Meld to one of the Vulcans. And then shortly after that, they released the limited edition collector's tin set, which had a silver border and actually had the 1994 dates and 1994 printings on it. Later on in 95, they also printed one more time a series of uncut sheets, one for each of the 3 rarities, common, uncommon, and rare. And they offered those as a mail-in purchase. As Decipher did a lot in the early sets, they way overprinted them relative to the demand at the price point that they had put them up for. And so later on, I don't know exactly which year, a number of those sheets that were unsold were cut and sold as sets. What's unique about those is on the back, they're indecipherable from 95 white border on the front, but on the back, they have an embossed logo that says official cut or official uncut sheet set, but they're cut cards.
And how rare are those uncut sheets?
The uncut sheets, I think they were limited to either 500 or no, they were limited, but I don't know the exact number. It's higher than 1,000. The uncut set cards are a subset of that total number. I just don't know what the numbers are off the top of my head.
Okay. And maybe for all of you, we have 6 different printings of the set. What's in the set? Number of cards. Like personnel, ships. The kind of what's actually in this set here.
This set has 363 cards, 121 rares, commons, and uncommons, respectively, and it's the foundation of the game. So it's cards from a lot of the original, or a lot of the card types are in the set. There's a couple of card types that came out in later sets.
Okay. And Johannes, as the player expert here, how would you describe how this set played out? Maybe just in general, and compared to later sets. What's Premier like playing wise?
Very slow compared to what the game developed into later. Mm-hmm. So you had your original 9 card types. You had missions, you had dilemmas and artifacts to put under the missions. You had personal and ships. You had events, interrupts, and equipment cards. And you were limited to playing 1 card only and drawing 1 card. So it could take a lot of time until you were ready to actually do missions. And weirdly enough, Decipher broke that pace with a single card in the set called Red Alert, which immediately broke the whole system and allowed you to just play as many cards as you had. So a lot of games in those days looked like this, that people spent several times playing Kiva's Farger Collector to just draw a big hand, play the Red Alert, and then dump whatever they had. So it sometimes depended on luck of the draw, and of course counter cards played a big role. There were some interrupts that countered the Keeper's Voucher, for example. So people, at least in my experience, stocked heavily on those to just make sure their opponent couldn't get their key card to go in and win the counter war.
So you're talking about this red alert. It seems like it's kind of the broken card in the set. Red alert aside, like what were the best strategies in this deck? If you're sitting down now with just the set, is it kind of suiting up? I don't know, Federation, playing on Romulan, completing missions. Is there some other kind of strategy that something you'd see at a table, or people just playing limited?
So the Federation had the most potential they had the most cards, they had the most varied skills, so naturally they were more talented at completing missions. There was also a couple of decks around Klingon ship destruction. So Klingons had quite easy to starve ships. So with one person on the board, you could then fly around. So there were some decks that were dedicated to just getting ships out, starve them with one personal, and then shoot stuff. And there were also decks that tried to have what you would call maybe combo decks these days, where you had a plan. You want to solve a certain mission first, where you seed a specific artifact, often the Betazoid gift box, that allows you to take any 3 cards from a deck into hand, and then you have the pieces that you need to pursue a different strategy. So there were some very interesting things. And what also made the game very interesting at that time was that you were allowed to solve opponents' missions. So you weren't necessarily trying to complete the missions you brought to the table, but your whole strategy was trying to steal your opponent's missions, which could be very frustrating, especially if you had different skill levels of players facing off.
When did that rule change?
I'm sorry?
When did that rule change that you couldn't participate in your opponent's missions?
I don't remember exactly. So there was the fair play card that came out. I'm not sure in which set. I wasn't playing actively at the time.
Okay.
And these days, actually, this was turned into a general rule, because it turned out that a lot of people found it very frustrating that their own missions could be stolen. Yeah. So there is a general rule now that all missions that are 35 points, that are worth 35 points or less, are protected unless they're universal missions, and everything that is higher, that is 40, 45 points and so on, that is up for grabs, that is fair game and can be stolen. So that still leaves that dimension in the game and keeps a little bit of that flavor from the early period.
Cool. Yeah, I hadn't heard of that. All right. Now, in our last video, you mentioned that with the virtual cards, you could kind of start, I think you said something like you could return to playing more Premier cards, but where does Premier fit into just gameplay currently?
It can still be competitive. What they really did well in those virtual sets, and what brought me back into the game, was that they created a play engine around those early cards. Since we're talking about the Star Trek CCG, we have to remember that it was originally the Star Trek The Next Generation customizable card game.
Right.
So what they did is they made use of the little property logo that appears in the upper right corner of the card, and then made cards that give you bonuses, like you get extra card draws, or you can play a certain card for free if it has that Star Trek The Next Generation property logo. And if you limited yourself to only these, then you got different bonuses and could play 2 personal per turn or 3 personal per turn and draw more cards. So they made use of something that was on the cards from the very first, but that wasn't gameplay relevant. And they now took these property logos and made them into a gameplay relevant thing, and which was a quite elegant thing, but it of course adds another layer of complexity.
That's why, again, I'm learning a lot today. I'd never heard of that either. Wow. So yeah, you get this extra use just out of the property symbol at the top right. Wow, cool. All right. Any other points, Johannes, you think are really important to mention, or you want to mention regarding playing the set?
Well, playing the set, there were a lot of very powerful artifacts in there. For example, there is the Horgan artifact that allows you to take double turns. And again, many people found it to be quite frustrating. By getting that single card out, you get to take 2 turns for every one I take. So some of these artifacts from the early days are quite powerful, and over the course of the years, they've been banned. because it was all or nothing. If you got them, you pretty much won the game. So it was a bit difficult to balance them. And maybe one card we should mention was a card called Raise the Stakes, which allowed you actually to either forfeit the game now or play on. And if you lose, then the opponent can take one of your cards into their possession. Yeah. So that's a card that actually was banned very quickly, because as far as I understood the situation, this led to problem with gambling laws in some of the US states, because it apparently was seen or could be construed to be some form of gambling, and that's why this card was banned from tournament play.
But I imagine from what I've seen on the Facebook group and just coming back into the game recently, we could probably make a whole video talking about Raise the Stakes and ante in the game. But I'm happy you brought that up, because I feel like there are a lot of games, maybe in '94 too, Magic, other games that did have the ante kind of component, outside of the game, and how the game dealt with it is certainly interesting when you could be playing a game at the kitchen table and potentially lose a card. So.
Yeah.
All right. So from a collector point of view, what's to note from this set? Maybe things to know, kind of special. I don't know. Just from a collector point of view, what's going on with Premier?
So, from a collector's perspective, this is still the most abundant set on the market. It's the easiest one to find and collect. Particularly White Border 95 is still available in sealed boxes and cases. Pretty affordably. Premier limited Black Border and White Border 94 are a lot harder to come across, just because in the early area they would be the ones the store would consume before getting 95 onto the shelf. So there's a lot of 95 left over, and there's a lot less of 94. It's still affordable to go out and pick up a set, and it's still affordable to go out and pick out most of the singles you'd be looking for a playing deck, as long as you're not particular which edition of Premier you're looking for that card from.
Dan, I've seen kind of photos of people's collections, and some folks have kind of binders with 4 different pockets, all the way across. And in one pocket they put the Black Border 94 limited, then the 1994 White Border, and then the 1995 White Border, and then the Silver Border edition. I know you mentioned there are 2 others. I mean, right behind you, the Silver Border, or the uncut sheets. You can't really, I guess you could put in there, and the special edition, which you said are similar to 94.
They cut those sheets, so they have sets of those cut.
Okay.
They just don't look any different from the front than the White Border 95s.
Right. Okay. So great. So the White Border 95, they have this piece on the back. Clearly that seems to be more sought after or harder to get than the Silver Border and the White Border 94. But between the White Border 94 and the Silver Border, which ones are rarer, or as a collector, which one would you be more inclined to pick up or want to collect?
It's a tough question. Which one's rarer? I'm not really sure. The tin they did significantly produce. They produced a lot of tins, just like they produced a lot of everything in 94 or in the Premier set. And so you can go and get a Silver Border tin still for a reasonable amount of money, especially if you don't care if it's been opened or not. The cards inside the tin are in 6 separate individual packets. 2 for rares, 2 for uncommons, 2 for commons. And so if you, and it's probably the easiest way to go and get a full set of the cards, because they're all equally rare in a Silver Border.
Yeah.
There's exactly the same number of Silver Border commons as Silver Border rares.
Got it. Okay.
And there's a little bit of a mission creep here, in that when I first started collecting again, it was finishing off my 94 set. I thought that's fine. I now have a copy of all the Premier cards, but that turned into adding a 95 set. It turned into adding a Black Border Premier Limited set. It turned into adding the tin. So really, when it comes to collecting, it's very different depending on if you want to get all the Premier sets. That's a challenge. Getting one Premier set, especially of 95, as Dan said, very easy, especially pack fresh. Getting all the sets, that becomes more challenging.
And remind me again, what were the what was more produced, the collector's box, which you have behind you, or the uncut sheets? How many of those are out there?
Uncut sheets are more common. The gift box, there were 250 made.
Okay. So you're comparing about a little, maybe over 1,000-ish to 250, you said?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Tom, any other pieces regarding collectability that you wanted to bring up regarding Premiere?
No, I think I can tell you about the exciting cards inside the sets when you're ready.
Okay, well, let's go to Johannes first. As a player, Johannes, what cards do we want to open up when I'm going to be opening up these packs from a player perspective? If we're looking for the best cards to play the game, what do we want to open up in these packs?
Well, I was always happy to find Federation Bridge Crew just because they were iconic characters and also they were skill monsters. If you have Data and Picard, they were really good at doing missions, sometimes doing missions on their own. But I often found the dilemmas to be the really good cards. For example, the Borg Ship Dilemma and the Q Dilemma, and also Shaka, the Walls Fell. When the Walls Fell was a really good dilemma that was good at stopping your opponent. And apart from those, I think some of the what's called the verb cards, so events and interrupts, were very important. As I mentioned, the Kiva's Farge Collector was the card that allowed you to draw through your deck quickly, and the Red Alert allowed you then to play all that. And there were also a couple of interesting cards that if I had to construct a deck with them, I would try and get. For example, there is an event called Static Warp Bubble, which forces your opponent to discard a card. If you get that out early, you can cripple your opponent's deck. So not something that helps you, but attacks the opponent. And there are lots of little interrupts in there that can also just slow down the opponent. Rogue Borg Mercenaries is a card that by Decipher was probably designed to be played in multiples, to have they escalate in power if you play more of them at the same time. In practice, what most people did was just play a single interrupt and attack them with a Borg with strength of 1. It will be instantly killed, but what it does is it forces the opponent to battle, stopping their force for that turn. So you just play that interrupt. That means they can't do anything with their ship and crew for that turn. Even if it's a ship with 20 angry Klingons, you just ping them with that one interrupt and they are stopped for their turn. So those were cards that players found very quickly that are very good in power level, even though they're just commons or uncommons in some cases.
So the Borg are an affiliation, but you've kind of given them a shout out here for being powerful. Going back to the Borg Ship Dilemma, I remember when I was playing, this is really the only set I've played, and I definitely remember trying to get that Red Alert out, getting the Horgon going quickly. I also remember that Borg ship just devastating, like being unable to protect yourself if it flipped over. Is that the case? Is that Borg ship as oppressive as I remember?
There is one ship in the Premier set, that's the non-aligned Hasnok ship that had shields of 12. That's the only ship that could survive an attack by the Borg ship without any boosts by metaphasic shields or mutational shields or whatever. But yes, compared to some of the other dilemmas in the Premier set, the Borg ship was ridiculously strong. And again, players found a way to deal with that. In the original rule set, you did not actually have to have a ship to attempt a space mission. So sometimes people seeded an outpost at the space mission and then said, okay, my guys at the outpost will now attempt to study that nebula or whatever, because then they didn't have a ship. The outpost had shields that could survive a hit by a Borg ship, and then they were safe. So that's something that changed later on, that you actually had to have a ship to expose yourself to the dangers of the Borg. But yes, you remember right, it was an oppressively strong dilemma.
Okay. I didn't know about the Rogue Borg Mercenary. That sounds very annoying. I'm happy that none of my friends decided to throw that out there.
One of my first decks was actually building a Rogue Borg Mercenaries deck, trying to make that take over my opponent's ships, not the ping away, but trying to use it as designed. And that was a nightmare to construct until Fajo came out.
Okay. And Borg became an affiliation later, right? So people that were trying to be this oppressive eventually got maybe their day in the sun where they could actually build.
Right.
board decks too. Okay, yeah. All right. So yeah, from a collector point of view, let me put you in here, Tom, as well. What are we looking to open up when we open up these packs?
Okay, well, we'll start with the downside in that in Premiere, as many people know, there is an overabundance of rare cards which are missions. And specifically, when you're opening these packs, you have a 24% chance of drawing a rare mission, most of which have relatively little value. One or two people still like because they are faction-specific missions to try and, that was preventing people from attempting your missions before that was a general rule. I looked through all the rares in this set, and I'd say you have an 11% chance of drawing a card that has decent sort of market value in terms of what you might want. And there's a huge overlap here between what Johannes was talking about, because obviously a lot of the cards are deriving their value partly from collectors, but also partly from players, and what you want multiples of. So on the dilemma side, Armor Skin of Evil is a dilemma which was always happy to be seen. I think he's wrecked more away teams by himself than any other mission. The Borg ship is probably the almost third or fourth most valuable card in the set because of its wonderful element in gameplay there. Q, most certainly. This has the ability to clear other dilemmas beneath it if passed. So this is a dilemma people would often seed on their own missions to help clear out things beneath that. Binar's weapon enhancements also comes in at a card that has above average market value because it is a card with a cumulative effect, meaning that you can just keep adding them and it'll get better and better. So anything like that often has value because you want more than one of them. Of course, as we had mentioned, any of the bridge crew are always welcome. Their value tends to scale pretty much with their rank, the only exception being Data is probably the second most valuable card, whereas Riker would be just beneath him. Beverly Crusher is surprisingly low value, actually, even though she's quite a powerful card. So she's the lowest value of the bridge crew. The USS Enterprise is right up there with Picard at the top. I'd say Picard and the Enterprise would be your two most exciting pulls that you could hope to encounter. Not many of the Romulan and Klingon personnel have significant market value. I'd say Sealer on the Romulan side is the only Romulan card with any significant above average value. And Klingons, while Gowron, Lursa, Bator, and Kern are all nice in a sort of lore sense, they don't have significant market value for trading. When it comes to uncommons and commons, I think uncommon, the value there is dominated by the game mechanic effects that Johannes mentioned. So, and it's almost always the counters to an extent. So Kivas Farjo is obviously at the top of our list, being card draw being so limited in the Premiere set. Kivas Farjo has significant importance. But then you get into the Kevin Uxbridge, which is the sort of counter to events. You get into Amanda Rogers, which is the counter to interrupts. You get into Q2, which is the counter to Kevin and Amanda. So those three cards, which all have synergy together, are above average value for the uncommon side. Uncommons that are also interesting would include the Traveler Transcendence, which is again a card draw mechanic, and Distortion of Space-Time Continuum, which is your other method to take an additional, not an entire additional turn, but an effective additional turn for a ship and crew. On the common side, we have Parlatov Alien Trader, which is a card recovery from your discard pile mechanism. The same with Res Q, it can also do a similar effect. Finally, Rogueborg Mercenaries, either for their cumulative effect, as Dan was mentioning, or their individual effect, as Johannes mentioned. And one that hasn't been mentioned so far is Wormhole. Sometimes people do want to pick up additional wormholes, either to mess with your enemy, to move yourself around, or any number of fun tasks you can do with those. So those are the cards we'd like to see coming out of this set.
Hey, thanks so much, Tom. And one of the things that I think we forgot to mention or talk about was the War Pack. And anyways, we're talking here, and I'm looking at the cards right here. Let's go backwards. Let's go back from 95 to 94 Blackwater Premiere for the the most sought after collectible last. But let's talk about the War Pack first. So War Pack came out between 94, right before the 1995 Whitewater. Can anybody speak to what this War Pack was all about?
Not a lot. I can talk to it just a little bit. In the time when they decided to reprint Whitewater again, they knew they needed to drive extra interest and make it playable with fewer cards. And so they made sure that they included a bunch of missions, at some of which you're very easy to get, they're commons anyway. But they also, this is their Decipher's first attempt at nerfing one of their own cards with Yellow Alert. They'd realized that Red Alert was so powerful that they needed to create a counter that was specific to it. And so you could play Yellow Alert, which would cancel your opponent's Red Alert.
There's a wonderful note here. If anyone picks up a copy of the Gamer's Guide for the Star Trek Next Generation customizable card game, they list what they think as the producers of the game as some of the most powerful cards. And if you read the entry for Red Alert, they write it as if it was their intent to always release Yellow Alert to nerf it rather than an emergency fix. So I'll give them full credit for their phraseology in pretending that they always wanted to try and fix that problem. Additionally, cards of interest for here are the Neutral Outpost. If, like me, you only had 1 or 2 decks when you started, even though I was playing a Federation affiliation, I did not have a Federation outpost in my first couple of decks. So the Neutral Outpost allowed you to play with, at minimum, even one 60-card starter deck could just about function with that. And the other card of note I would say in here is the Montgomery Scott. He is in a white border note here. He comes in black border in a future set, but I think this was the sort of little gift for players who didn't need the warp pack to solve the problems we were discussing, but it was a nice little gesture to give us something new to play with in this set here. And there is also the Countermander card, I believe, which has a role in those 3 cards of synergy, the Kevin Uxbridge, Amanda Rogers, and Q2 type counter card phenomenon that's occurring at this point.
Okay.
One more card of vague note in there is the Sensitive Search. It's the only place that card shows up other than the 2-player game. So it between that and Montgomery Scott, and Countermanda, those are the 3 truly unique cards in here. I guess Yellow Alert's the 4th. Uniquely identifiable.
Yeah, that's a good point. Going through boxes of just cards, it's easy to kind of see Montgomery Scott or Sensitive Search and think they're 95 when they're in fact not. Whereas, here's Relief Mission, which I know is in 95 as well. So it's interesting that there are those unique cards amidst a lot of missions that are just returning.
From a collector's perspective, you can still pick these up for relatively low cost. They're obviously very abundant, so there's not a high demand. But what is in demand for many people is the box of sealed warp packs, because that would have been sent to distributors who would have opened it and distributed the warp packs. And it's very rare to find a sealed box of sealed warp packs if you're building a sealed collection, if that's important to you there. So that's the only significant hurdle I can think of collection-wise for if you want a warp pack open or closed.
Yeah, and you all mentioned 95 is pretty. I'm gonna pin this now so we can just look at this screen right here. But you all mentioned the 95 while having a little focus trouble after it was pretty good for a while. I think you mentioned that whiteboard knife was pretty plentiful. When I got back in the game, I found a lot of boxes of whiteboard 95, and the difference here is the date right there, 1995. When I got back in it, I think maybe a few years before the pandemic, these were pretty easy to find. And I realized that they're not the 94s I collected as a kid, but like you all had mentioned before, there's a lot of similar cards. So let's go ahead and open up. This is whiteboard 95. Again, this came after the 94s. Yeah, Dan.
A quirk from the collector. If you pull the whiteboard 94 and 95 pack next to each other, upside down.
Okay. Both upside down or?
Back. Show me the back sides.
Okay.
Did you fold so when you find packs in the wild, the flap on the pack is almost always up for a 95 and almost always down for a 94, hiding the date.
94 is usually hidden?
Correct.
So we have a rarity or an oddball here then.
Manufactured in both the limited set and in 94, they were manufactured with the flap down over the date, and they flipped that for 95 so that it was visible. I don't know if it was on purpose, but that's the way I found thousands of packs in the wild.
So you're saying this whiteboard 95 in the wild is consistent with what you generally see. Yep. You see 95. You're saying that this limited edition.
It's
This is the
consistent
black
with
border.
what I see for 94s.
Right. And this is the white border 94, which is,
You can tell by looking at it, it's been folded over. That's not its
Yeah.
natural resting position.
yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, somebody unfolded this over. Okay. Wanted to take a peek at the, make sure, I guess. Oh.
Yep.
All right. Well, here we go. 1995 white border. Again, I am listening to what you all said. Tom, you said 11% chance of getting a great rare here.
Yep, and a 24% chance of getting a mission.
Rare missions certainly are something I'm used to. So we'll see. We got 3 tries here, right? 3 different packs.
I'll call study Lonka Pulsar.
Yeah.
This is
Interesting call. That was the last card I needed for my white border set.
which card was that?
Study Lanka Pulsar.
Rare mission to the rescue. I gotta say the glue here is really sticky. It's very hard to open this without ripping this pack. And I'm just ripping. Oh, right away we got one of those counter cards. One of
Yep.
our uncommons is the
That's
Amanda
good.
Rogers. 95. There we go. All right. And as folks mentioned, I think the first 3 are going to be uncommon here, and then the 4th is going to be the rare. And when I did this back in the day, I would peek and hope for a Federation. I know there's a lot of nice dilemmas and other cards you mentioned. We have a Shariar.
Mhm.
And okay, here's our rare card. We'll take a peek at the top left corner and see. It is, oh, it's blue. We have a chance for a Federation. And when I was playing this game, I kind of called the Power 9, the Bridge Crew, Wesley, and the Enterprise. So I'm excited right now. I'm real excited. We started off with the blue. Here we go. Let's see. Is it Bridge Crew? Is it Bridge Crew? Oh!
Oh! Excellent.
Very nice.
Great pull.
Wow. I consider this one of the best 9 cards to open. Tom, you mentioned the 11% here. Can someone explain what this card is? Do it. Come on, Star Trek fans.
This is obviously with the card game being the next generation customizable card game. It's not necessarily the most powerful ship. You could argue that Husnock ship is better, but it is the iconic ship that obviously defined the series. It's wonderful as a Federation player to have that shield value. It's a relatively high weapon for Federation thing. And a collector's note on this front, when it comes to the 95 edition, there are obviously sub-printings within 95, and the USS Enterprise is famous for having 2 different print defects possibly present on the card, one large blotch on the dish and the other small blotch on the dish. And you seem to have a fairly pristine 1995 USS Enterprise. So I don't think you could have asked for a better card to pull from your first deck.
Agreed.
Gentlemen, I think this is a great start. I'm happy we started backwards. And Tom, you reminded me, yeah, most of my 95 Enterprises I've seen have those little torpedo blasts, little print errors right here. And you're right, we have a pretty pristine version. So this is a great start. And I do think, I ordered a few. I really wanted to open all these packs. And I do think that this pack came from Mr. Dan Winterhalter, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So wanted to finish my packs to open them up. So we started with an Enterprise. All right.
Fantastic.
Here's the Pelor Toff. I think somebody mentioned this card before.
Yep.
One
It's one of the best of the commons in terms
Yep.
of value.
It's
Okay.
also the oldest Star Trek actor currently alive.
Oh, do you have more info on that, Dan?
Nehemiah Persoff. He's 100 and I forget.
Wow. Okay. All right. Loss of orbital
That's another
stability.
good. The loss of orbital stability can also be a very strong card because again,
Yep.
it's another card that can stop a ship and make it unable to move, forcing your opponent to waste a turn. So often an overlooked card.
Okay. This Miranda, we got some print errors right here. You can see those print dots that I think, are a little different on the Enterprise, but are pretty common in the set.
Mendon is an interesting card if you're actually going through and not opening packs, but opening somebody else's collection. This was the newest error and variant we've discovered 20-something years later in the game. They printed, and Mendon is one of the 17 typo reprints. Specialists was misspelled on the 94 version. And in the 2-player game, which we haven't mentioned yet, which was pre-constructed decks, they have a different variant of this that is also 1995.
Okay. There's a phaser, pretty iconic. Knight, Archer. I did like this dilemma back in the day. We have a Klingon. A lot of ships, 3 ships. Excelsior, Miranda, and the Enterprise here. And then we got back to Amanda Rogers. So Yeah, we got Cerna again. I think this was really fun for me because that fourth card, I love playing this game, and boom, there it was. So, all right, that's our 95.
Awesome,
So-
awesome.
If I can just add a comment, you had two Federation personnel there with only one skill. You had the Sirna Kolrami and Mendon, I believe. So
Yes.
that's a good example of cards that were relatively weak compared to Data and Picard. And this is something that Decipher would later fix and bring out cards, specifically assign mission specialists, that then later on retcon these cards to say any personnel with only one regular skill is a mission specialist, and then they can score you bonus points. So they did some ways to kind of make even the weaker cards meaningful in the later sets as the game progressed.
Interesting. Okay. Okay, next we've got our Wrong Flaps 1994. So this is the same, basically. I mean, they're all the same, but you're saying we got more typos. And a little more issues on the 94, is that right?
Yeah, there are 17 cards that have either typos or gameplay variations changed.
I found the 94 have been a little more free of the printing defects that tended to plague 95, especially for the higher value cards.
Yep.
We're starting with an uncommon Dilemma Hyperaging. No one, I think, has mentioned this before. Got some bonus points there. Well, we have another Federation, 2 skills, so not a mission specialist, retcon. Okay.
Later on, they call these support personnel, so there is also a card that makes use of those.
Okay. Auto-destruct sequence. All right, we're gonna do the same game here. We have another blue, folks. We have another blue card. This could be another Bridge Crew Power 9 that I said. What we got? Wow.
There you go.
Fantastic.
Nice.
Beat
I
me
was
out
almost rooting
today.
for you to get a Lonka Pulsar at this point, but well done, sir.
I'll get it in black border.
Yeah, that's the true revenge.
So you did mention this card is a little lower. At the same time, it is another one of the 9 cards I was really looking for when I was a kid. Wow.
It is the lowest value of the Bridge Crew. Even Wesley Crusher tends to have more market value than Beverly, and she's quite a powerful card. With the 2 medical components there, she's not that bad a card, but she is the lowest and the slowest selling of the Power 9.
If I remember correctly, there is a card in the premier set that can be a mission that can be done by Beverly Crusher on her own. And also the 2 medical, if I remember correctly, was what you needed to power the Genetronic Replicator, which was another very powerful card in the first set.
I was going to mention that. It's definitely a staple of my childhood deck, was the Replicator in Beverly.
Yeah. Yeah, I liked her for a few reasons. I think there were a few dilemmas that needed medical. And she came in handy, and also, female identified characters were pretty underrepresented in the game. And there was, I think, females love interest, which kind of would nuke, female players, right away. So, having her, avoid that, I think was important because when I got that, oh, here it is. Yeah, the females love interest, right? Female away team member runs away. Since there's so few females, I feel like it was always Beverly Crusher. So I'd always want to avoid this dilemma and try to save her for when she was, I needed to use her. All right, we got another dilemma there. Subspace interference, structure overload. Some 2 Romulans. Runabout.
A ship that had no staffing requirements. So if you have any Federation personnel, you could get them where you wished they had already been.
Yep. Scan. I used to use this card to peek, see if there's a Borg ship lurking.
Yes, that's one of the cards that was later nerfed pretty heavily because it turned out that just looking at all the dilemmas and gaining so much intelligence by just playing a card that plays for free was just too powerful. And these days, that card does no longer work.
Interesting. Okay. Well, no more rare missions yet. You got these two blue cards. All right, now we're gonna do the limited, and this was harder for me to get a hold of. I feel like these sets are definitely worth more than the others. So let's excited here, opening some black border. I never had any of these either when I was a kid.
The only kind of pack for first edition I've never opened.
All right, well, let's do some vicarious pack opening. Here we go. See if we can keep the streak of blue rare cards alive.
Leia Brahms.
This pack was so much easier to open. The glue was much easier than the other 2 disasters.
Okay, so for this first card, we have a good example of some of the things that Decipher was still figuring out early on. If we look at this dilemma, especially at the game text, it says, experience enemy hologram trick, you are tempted to divulge secrets. What does that mean in gameplay terms? So they had this tendency of sometimes including flavor text into the actual game text box. So that's something that you wouldn't see on a card in later sets. You would have all that flavor stuff in the lore box and keep the game text box simply for stuff that is needed to understand what you have to do there.
To be fair, Johannes, this could be a hybrid. I mean, the flavor text does say holograms can be used to create realistic fantasy worlds. So maybe we're playing a fantasy game of Star Trek CCG within the actual game here. So the text is a little bit flavored down here too. Interesting. All right. So hologram ruse. We've got two-dimensional creatures.
That one was always annoying.
We got first contact. This is the mission I think that Deanna Troy can solve on her own. Is that right? Diplomacy.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So here's our rare. We'll see what we got. We'll peek in. We have blue again.
Wow.
We have blue. I asked for a blue rare. 3 blue rares. What do we have? Okay.
Barclay.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Now is he one of the 11% or not?
He's not one of the 11, but he will often go for slightly above your sort of average card price. He's not as powerful as you think he might be, given his character on the show.
Right.
There is some interest from collectors on this side, so I'd say he's certainly above average for a Federation personnel in terms of value.
And I think it's really a bold choice of picture, because normally you wouldn't hide your faces behind the barrels like that, and I really like that they took some iconic scenes to portray the character, not go for the close-up all the time.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think this is we talked about the flavor of the game earlier on and why it was such a wonderful feel, and I think you're exactly right. I think that's mirrored in these images.
You have a little bit of some print errors here too, so just continue that theme of some of these cards are not perfect.
Yeah. And Federation personnel like this, I mean, Reg's card is somewhat sought after if you're looking to get Dwight Schultz's autograph in a Star Trek context. This is more popular than the ultra rare and the Borg for autographs from my experience.
Okay. Another one personnel, Federation. Yeah, a lot of these cards have this interesting print error at the top. I don't know, is that more common? You said, I think, Tom, you mentioned you thought it was more common actually to have 95.
95 tends to have unfortunate defects on some of the higher value cards, whereas pack by pack, you can often have quite a big variance in what they've been exposed to and how they've developed.
Yeah.
Bunch of missions in a row.
Yeah, a few of these missions were repeated from our war pack. I think Excavation and Stellar Study Collision we'd seen before in White Border. The Federation Outpost. There we go.
So we can actually play the game now.
Oh, I thought we had 3 in a row. We have 2 in a row. The Federation and the Klingon. Yeah.
That does make it a lot easier to play the game.
If you can just pull out the Romulan mission that you had in there, Covert Installation, I believe it's called. Yeah. So that's also something that was later turned into a game concept. If you read the lore, it's stationed in the neutral zone. So later on, they brought out more missions that were in the same area of space, and then you had to seat these cards next to each other. So you could also arrange the space line in the way that was more beneficial to you. So there was the neutral zone region, you had the Badlands later on, you had Sector 001 where Earth was. So a lot of those things that were already present were then later fleshed out into the more meaningful concepts.
Okay. Yeah, what's your kind of overall take on the cards we opened? Did it bring back any memories, or bring up any other issues or ideas you wanted to talk about with Premiere?
It brings up great jealousy. That was a spectacular set of cards to pull statistically. Well done, sir. That was good fun.
Just gonna get my video back up. Feel free to chat for a moment while
I think what would be everyone's first rare pull? Does anyone remember what their very first rare was?
My very first rare was the Q Dilemma. I got super lucky. It was the front of the 2 rares in the starter deck box. That was the first thing I opened. I don't remember what the second one was. I remember getting Q.
For me, it was Wharf, which was a bridge pull, and that amongst my 3 friends who had bought a few packs, that instantly determined that I would be the Federation player amongst that set, because another friend pulled Garon, and then he was going to be Klingon, and there was no way around it. But I can tell you exactly what the room was like when I saw that Wolf card come out of the pack.
I have the worst rare of everybody. I had a Duras, a pull, Klingon Duras. So it's interesting you both had those powerful cards. Johannes, what did you open?
For me, it was actually 4 rare cards because the first cards I bought were 2 starter decks. I don't think we had booster packs in that local store at the time. And looking back, I had great pulls. One had William Riker and the time travel pod artifact. The other had a rare mission. As I found out later, it was a rare mission, and Jean-Luc Picard, which I figured was a rare, but I didn't have any lists or anything to judge that. And as I was looking forward to this video shoot, I actually looked through all my stuff, and I found that white border Picard, although it's no longer a white border Picard. Let me just share it here real quick. So as I got more and more black border cards, I decided that I wanted my bridge crew to also be black border, and so 15-year-old me took to a Sharpie and gave this a custom-made black border, and that's why I always kept it separate and never put it into any trade cards and so on, because you don't want to cheat anybody with stuff like that. But I won't ever trade this away. It's just a very good memory, and it really encapsulates the nostalgia I feel for the game.
That is both wonderful and shameful.
At least it wasn't a black border one that you like silver sharpied or something.
Oh, got white out and painted the borders white. Yeah, you can do that.
Can I just tell you something really shocking?
Sure.
I said I play, and sometimes we play really just for fun, and we occasionally did what we call Ironman tournaments. Now, those are tournaments where you get your booster packs, you rip them open, you assemble a deck, and whenever a personal is killed or the card is discarded, you must physically rip them up.
Ooh.
That hurts collectors, and a couple of years ago we played that, and the person who donated all those packs graciously donated some motion picture packs as well. So I remember a lot of cards that would be worth quite a lot today being ripped up, because for the guys it was an ephemeral pleasure, if you will. It was not something that they see as an investment. The joy comes in playing the game. So I think that's where the attitudes can drift apart very, very widely.
That makes an anti-time anomaly look pretty tame by comparison.
Yeah.
Man.
We probably wouldn't do it these days.
Well,
I think for all of us, there are cards. I mean, the first rare is going to have significance. I also remember my friend who played the Klingon faction could very rarely find cards that had diplomacy, and I would often just hem him in with Q-nets. And I remember getting Q-nets. He would never get. It's a relatively common card. And then I think I still have the email somewhere on an old hard drive where he pulled his very first Q-net, thinking that he had this game-changing card. But of course, playing Federation, you could sail through them fairly simply. So
No
to me, even though Q-net is not a major card in the game, it has significance for me, and I'm always happy to see it.
Well, thank you all for helping me through this pack opening. This was a special one for me because it was just filled with nostalgia. This is really the only set I played, so opening up these packs was very nostalgic, and just having 3 blue Federation cards every pack of the way was pretty awesome. Opening up those packs, I'm excited for our next videos because I don't know as much about those cards, and certainly interested to hear from you all and fill in some gaps with what I know and don't know. This was kind of a trip down memory lane for sure for me, opening up these cards. Thank you all for being here, hearing your stories, and let's move on to our next video.
Sounds great.